The silver spoon in my hand felt heavy, a cold contrast to the heated tension radiating across the mahogany dining table. I am Charlotte Merritt. For years, I've meticulously built a stable life for myself and my 12-year-old son, Daniel. But tonight, that stability didn't just crack, it shattered. We were supposed to be having a family dinner. I bought the groceries, I own the house. Yet, as the candlelight flickered, the atmosphere turned toxic. Without warning, Dad, his face a distorted mask of purple rage, slammed his hand onto the table. "You and your kid are just freeloaders," he screamed in my face. I looked at Mom. I expected a reprimand, a defense, or at least a look of shock. Instead, she simply smiled, a thin, practiced curve of the lips, and nodded in silent agreement. Beside her sat Nellie, my older brother, the golden child who had spent his life coasting on their excuses and my sacrifices. The cruel irony burned in my throat. They were shouting these insults while sitting in my dining room, living under my roof, eating food bought with my paycheck. I didn't cry. I didn't scream back. Under the table, I felt a heavy, warm weight settle over my feet. Barnaby, my golden retriever, had sensed the shift in the room. He didn't bark, he just rested his large golden head on my lap, his steady breathing a silent anchor. He was the only one in that room who truly cared about my peace. I looked Dad and Mom straight in the eyes, my voice dropping to a calm, lethal whisper that left the room frozen. "Since you feel like guests of a freeloader, I think it's time you found a host more to your liking." From that moment, everything began to crumble. Why did I have to face my parents like this? What drove our relationship to fracture so deeply it may never heal? What would you do if you were in the same situation? Share your thoughts. Your story might be the message someone else needs to hear.
To understand that moment in the dining room, I have to take you back to where the rot first started. I was 18, full of dreams, when my world turned upside down. My grandfather had left me $100,000 in his will, a safety net meant for my future. I was picturing a career in computer science. But Mom and Dad had other ideas. One humid summer evening, they called me into the living room. Dad sat in his reclined chair, his face stern. "We need your inheritance," he said, his voice flat. I blinked, my stomach twisting. Need it for what? Mom finally looked at me. "Your brother has a chance to make it big. He's starting a construction business with your father. We'll pay you back." Nellie, the golden child, wasn't even there to explain himself. I stood there clutching my acceptance letter to the University of Louisville. "What about my college?" I asked, my voice shaking. Dad shrugged. "You can get loans, Charlotte. This is for the family." Mom nodded. "Nellie's business will set us all up." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My future was gone, redirected to a pipe dream I had no say in. In the corner, a young Barnaby, then just a clumsy golden retriever puppy, whined softly. He patted over and licked my trembling hand. It was the only comfort I had. Spoiler alert, the business flopped within a year. They never mentioned paying me back, not once. That night, looking at my puppy and my empty bank account, I made a choice. I packed a duffel bag, grabbed my laptop, and the $500 I'd saved from babysitting. I walked out without a goodbye. No one stopped me. No one called to check if I was okay. I was 18, alone and determined to prove I didn't need them. But how does an 18-year-old with nothing but a puppy and a dream build a life from scratch? And how did those same people end up sitting at my table 18 years later calling me the freeloader? In the background, the piano hits a final, sharp, discordant note that echoes into the sound of a door clicking shut. When I moved near campus, the place was tiny. 3 of us squeezed in just to keep rent manageable. College was a headache. Tuition drained me dry. I picked up every shift I could, waitressing, stocking shelves, tutoring. Some nights I'd pass out on a bare mattress, too worn out to even think about dinner. There were weeks where instant noodles and coffee were all I could afford.
Through everything, Barnaby stuck with me. I smuggled him into that cramped apartment, my loyal golden shadow. Whenever the exhaustion felt too heavy, he'd curl up and lay his head on my lap. He was the only one who reminded me I wasn't truly alone. I'd look at the acceptance letter taped to my wall just to keep going. Dad's words always echoed, "This is for the family." Funny thing, their family never seemed to include me. Mom would call twice a year, sticking to the same detached script. "How's school?" she'd ask, before instantly pivoting. "Nellie's working so hard on his new project." Always Nellie. I clawed my way through out of pure spite. I graduated at the top of my class, landed a tech job in Louisville, and for the first time, I could breathe. I met my ex-husband there. Clever, funny. I thought I'd finally found stability. Then Daniel came along. But 3 years in, I found the messages on his phone. I didn't beg. I just packed his bags and said, "Get out." He stayed in Daniel's life and sent the child support, but those years made me tougher. I earned every bit of what I have, while my parents and Nellie glided by, dodging responsibility. They never apologized for taking my inheritance. They never asked if I was hungry. All that hurt collected inside me, building up in the quiet. I was a product manager, a homeowner, a mother. I had built a fortress. I just didn't realize that the people who tore down my first life were about to knock on the door of my second one. The electronic pulse quickens, then stops with a sharp, heavy bass hit, like a door being struck by a firm hand. At 36, I've put together a life I actually love. My home in the Louisville suburbs isn't just real estate, it's a fortress I built brick by brick. Barnaby, my old golden retriever, spends his afternoons sprawling in the sunny spots on the hardwood floors I polished myself. He's seen the whole journey. Then there's Daniel, my 12-year-old heartbeat. I catch my own stubborn streak in him every time he haggles for one more round of a video game. I keep telling him he's enough, no need to chase approval. But then there's Mom and Dad. After 18 years of silence, the scripts changed. The occasional birthday card turned into a constant digital handout. "How's work, Charlotte?" Mom would text. It was never about me. It was always about Nellie. "Dad's business isn't doing well," or "Nellie's trying something new." The asks piled up. $5,000 for a car, $10,000 for a vague business deal. When I started saying no, the guilt tripping began. Dad's voice would growl through the speaker. "We sacrificed so much for you." Sacrifice? They meant the inheritance they stole. I stopped answering. I leaned on my real family, my best friend and financial advisor, Denise Bailey. She's blunt. She didn't sugarcoat it. "They're using you," she said. "You don't owe them a dime." That stuck. I started setting boundaries. I wasn't looking for closure. I just wanted to move forward. But one evening, the boundary didn't matter. Mom's number flashed on my screen. Her voice didn't have the usual demanding edge. It shook. It was brittle. That call pulled me right back into the storm I'd spent nearly 2 decades fighting my way out of. "Charlotte," she sobbed, "the bank. They're taking the house. We have nowhere to go. Nellie's gone, and your father, he can't handle this." My heart hit my ribs. I looked at Barnaby, who had already stopped napping, to nudge my hand. He knew. Before I could even process the anger, the daughter I used to be whispered, "Help them." Landing in Louisville, dread and resolve mixed in my chest. I picked up a rental and drove out to the old house. The place looked shrunken, paint peeling, the lawn wild. It was smaller than I remembered, a ghost of the fortress I once thought it was. Mom opened the door. She looked tired, her skin washed out. "Thank you for coming," she said. I just nodded and walked inside. Dad was sprawled in the living room, visibly diminished, but his eyes were still sharp, still stubborn. No sign of Nellie. Typical.
He was probably off chasing another sure thing while the walls closed in. Over coffee, Mom laid it all out. $300,000 in debt, a failing heart, a foreclosure notice that didn't care about family history. "You have the means, Charlotte," she said. The desperation was slipping away, replaced by that old, heavy expectation, like my success was just a bank account they'd been waiting to withdraw from. I stayed quiet, looking at the familiar cracks in the ceiling. I thought about Daniel back home, safe and unaware of this rot. I thought about the spa where I'd left Barnaby. I hated leaving him behind. I could almost feel the phantom weight of his head on my knee, the low, worried whine he'd make if he saw me sitting in this kitchen again. "We are family," Dad growled from the other room, his voice raspy but demanding. "We sacrificed for you." There it was, the lie they'd polished for 18 years. They didn't see a daughter who had survived. They saw a solution to a problem they created. I looked at the woman who had watched them steal my future and simply smiled. "I'm not here to write a check, Mom," I said, my voice as cold as the coffee in my mug. "I'm here to see the books, and then I'm going to decide if this house is worth saving or if it's time to let the fire finish what you started." A sudden, disorienting, chest-pounding boom.
The next night, I agreed to stay for dinner. I figured we'd have a civilized talk about the foreclosure. Instead, I walked right into a setup. Turns out they'd invited Nellie, too. He showed up late, smirking like always. Mom fussed over him, piling his plate high, while Dad sat at the head, tense and unreadable. Without Barnaby there to anchor me, the house felt even heavier. Nellie launched into a monologue about his latest real estate scheme, as shaky as all the ones before. Then Dad broke the silence. "Charlotte, we need to talk about the house. We owe $300,000 and the bank is ready to take it." I set down my fork. "So what's the plan?" Mom didn't miss a beat. Her voice was sharp. "The plan is you, Charlotte. You're making, what, $350 a year? You could cover at least $200,000. It's the least you can do for us." Not a request, a demand, as if my hard work was just a family asset they were entitled to harvest. "Why do you expect me to take on all of this?" I asked. Dad's expression darkened. "You've always been selfish," he snapped. "We gave you everything, and now you're just hoarding your money." Everything? They'd stripped my inheritance and tossed me out at 18. Nellie chimed in, dripping with attitude. "Don't act like the victim, Charlotte. Grow up." My hands clenched under the table. They hadn't mentioned Daniel once. Then Mom leaned forward, her smile icy. "You and your kid are freeloaders," she said, "living off our sacrifices, acting like you're better than us." That word, freeloaders, felt like a slap, but when she brought up Daniel, something snapped. I shoved my chair back. "Don't talk about my son," I said, my voice dropping to that lethal whisper. "Family doesn't demand what I've earned. You want to call us freeloaders? Fine, I'm done." I walked out of that dining room, finally able to breathe. I figured the drama had peaked, but Mom wasn't done. 2 days later, my phone blew up. Friends, coworkers, even Daniel's soccer coach. "Have you seen this?" I opened social media, and there it was, Mom's video. Her cheeks were wet, her voice shaky. "My daughter abandoned us," she sobbed. "She's turned her back on her own blood." The caption screamed, "Ungrateful daughter leaves parents to lose everything." Thousands had watched. Strangers called me heartless. It twisted me up inside, but I knew better than to scream back in public. I needed a plan. I called Denise. "I want control," I told her. She didn't miss a beat. "Then buy the house, Charlotte. Buy it out from under them."
That idea hit me like a jolt. I met with Laura, a real estate attorney. The bank was moving on $300,000 in default. Your finances can handle it, she confirmed. Within a week, the paperwork was done. Signing those papers felt strange. My hand didn't shake. Suddenly, I was the legal owner of the place I grew up in. I was sewing up an old wound. But I didn't stop there. Laura drafted a contract. They could stay, but only as tenants. They owe me $300,000 over 5 years, interest included. Miss a payment, and they're out. The rope was finally mine. Along with the deed, Laura sent a cease and desist for the video. Defamation has consequences, she wrote. I was done staying quiet. Later, when I went to pick up Barnaby, he barreled into me, his tail slapping the floor like a drum. I buried my face in his golden fur, the only honest thing left in my world. We're going home, Barnaby, a real home.
When the legal notice arrived, Mom called within minutes. Her voice was shrill with a fury I'd never heard. "You think you can control us, Charlotte?" she spat. "You're no better than us, throwing your money around. This is our home." "No, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a calm, clinical tone. "It was your home. Now it's my investment. Sign the contract and pay the rent or find somewhere else to live." I hung up. I didn't need the excuses. Nellie texted later, "You're ruthless." I didn't reply. He was the last person with the right to judge me. I flew back to Louisville and picked up Daniel. He ran to me, and behind him, Barnaby let out a joyous bark, his golden tail nearly knocking over a lamp. "Did you fix everything, Mom?" Daniel asked. I hugged him tight. "I'm working on it, kid." But the peace didn't last. A week later, Laura called. "They're refusing to sign, Charlotte. They're claiming they don't owe you anything because they raised you." I wasn't surprised. They had spent their lives dodging accountability. "Start the eviction proceedings," I said. My heart didn't even flutter. The process was thorough. Mom sent a flurry of texts. "You're tearing this family apart. How can you do this to your own blood?" I saved every one as evidence. When the sheriff finally served the notice, Nellie was there, pale and silent. They had 30 days to vacate. During that month, Barnaby became my shadow more than ever. Every time I reviewed legal documents, he'd bring me a worn-out tennis ball, a constant reminder of the family I built on loyalty, not just DNA. By the end of the month, they were gone. I flew back one last time to inspect the property. Walking through those empty rooms felt like stepping into a ghost story. The kitchen was cluttered with unwashed dishes. My old bedroom was filled with the remnants of Nellie's failed business ventures. I didn't linger. I hired a cleaning crew and a locksmith. Standing on the overgrown front lawn, I looked at the house and realized I felt nothing. No triumph, no sadness, just a quiet sense of closure. The keys in my pocket were heavy, but the weight in my chest was finally gone. I learned later that Mom and Dad had rented a small apartment on the edge of town. They'd both found part-time jobs, forced for the first time in decades to stand on their own. Nellie, unsurprisingly, was sleeping on their couch, still chasing his next big idea. I didn't care for the details. Their lives were no longer my burden to carry. But letting go was harder than I expected, not because I wanted their approval, but because closing that door meant giving up the secret hope that things could ever be different. I blocked the numbers. I deleted the voicemails. The TikTok video was gone, but the sting of those strangers' comments lingered. They called me cruel without knowing the 18 years of betrayal that led to that moment. Barnaby became my anchor during those quiet weeks. Every time I caught myself wondering if I'd been too hard on them, he'd trot over with a comforting woof and nudge my hand. He refused to let me stay in that dark dining room. I threw myself into work, sharpening my focus. I wasn't just surviving a family war, I was thriving in spite of it. One evening, Denise came over. We sat on the back deck, watching Daniel throw a frisbee for Barnaby. The golden retriever was getting slower, his muzzle turning white, but he still leaped with everything he had. "You're free now," Denise said. "They can't touch you anymore." "I know," I said, watching the sunset bleed over the Kentucky hills. "But freedom has its own weight, Denise. I've spent so long defining myself against them. Now I have to figure out who I am without the fight." I looked at my son, laughing as Barnaby did a clumsy victory lap. Every choice I'd made, the house, the legal battle, the eviction, was for him. I wanted to show him what it looks like to stand up for yourself, even when the people pushing you are the ones who are supposed to love you most.
The transition into this new, quiet life was surreal. For weeks, the silence in my house felt like a physical presence, a stark contrast to the years of digital pings and desperate voicemails. I spent my evenings in the backyard with Daniel and Barnaby, watching the fireflies dance over the lawn. One Saturday, I found a scanned copy of my grandfather's will. Seeing his signature brought back the sting of that $100,000 loss, but for the first time, the anger didn't boil over. I looked at Barnaby, who was sprawled across my feet like a golden rug. "We made it, buddy," I whispered. I decided it was time to finalize the house in Louisville. I didn't want to be a landlord to a ghost story anymore. I called Laura and told her to list the property for sale. "I want the proceeds to go directly into Daniel's college fund," I instructed. "I'm turning that stolen inheritance into his future. It stops with him." A few days later, a friend sent a screenshot of a new post from Mom, a cryptic quote about a mother's pain. I felt a brief tug of guilt, but then I remembered the dining room. I remembered the word freeloader. I remembered Nellie's smirk. I didn't click. I didn't check the comments. Instead, I put my phone face down. "Hey, kiddo," I called to Daniel. "You want to help me and Barnaby plant those hydrangeas?" His face lit up. "Can Barnaby dig the holes?" "He'll probably just sit in them," I laughed. As we worked in the dirt, I realized I wasn't just building a garden, I was reinforcing the walls of my sanctuary. My team at work noticed the calm too. My boss even discussed a promotion to senior director. "You've got this grit, Charlotte," he said. "Nothing seems to rattle you." I smiled, thinking of the sheriff and the years of instant noodles. "I've had some practice," I replied. That night, as I tucked Daniel in, he looked at me seriously. "Mom, are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at Barnaby sleeping at the foot of his bed, then back at my son's honest face. "I am, Daniel," I said, and for the first time in 18 years, I knew I wasn't lying. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The final sale of the Louisville house went through faster than I expected. A young couple with 2 toddlers and a scruffy rescue dog bought it, starting their own history in those creaky rooms. As I signed the closing papers, a physical weight lifted. Every cent went into a trust for Daniel. The inheritance my parents stole was finally restored, transformed into a shield for my son's future. But the real test came on a rainy Tuesday. A restricted number popped up. "Charlotte?" It was Mom. Her voice sounded thin, stripped of the rehearsed drama. "Your father, his heart. The surgery didn't go well. He's asking for you." I sat in silence. In the past, I would have panicked. I would have reached for my checkbook and prepared to be the sacrificial lamb again. But then I looked at the photo on my desk, Daniel grinning at a soccer game and Barnaby sitting proudly beside him. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I truly am, but I've already said my goodbyes to that life." "How can you be so cold?" she whispered. "He's your father." "And I was your daughter," I replied, "but that didn't stop you from calling me a freeloader in my own home. I hope he recovers, but my place is here with my son." I hung up. No tears, no shaking hands. When I got home, the rain had turned to mist.
Barnaby met me at the door, his golden tail wagging in slow, rhythmic thumps. He knew. He always knew when I'd closed a door for good. Daniel was in the living room with star charts and model rockets. "Mom, look, I figured out the trajectory for the Mars mission." I sat on the floor and Barnaby flopped down between us, resting his heavy head on my lap. As I looked at my son's excitement and felt the warmth of my loyal dog, I realized the real twist in my life. The twist wasn't the betrayal or the legal battle. The twist was that I didn't need their apology to be whole. I didn't need their family to have a home. I had built a kingdom out of the bricks they tried to throw at me, and for the first time in 36 years, the air I breathed was entirely my own.
The final chapter of my old life didn't end with a grand apology or a tearful reconciliation. It ended with a quiet Tuesday morning and the smell of rain on the pavement. Dad eventually recovered from his surgery, or so I heard through Denise. They remained in their apartment with Nellie still anchored to their couch, a trio bound by their own choices. I didn't reach out. For the first time, the silence from their end didn't feel like a vacuum. It felt like peace. One afternoon, I sat on the back porch watching Daniel run drills. Barnaby was right there with him, his golden fur glowing in the late afternoon sun. The old dog couldn't keep up with the sprints anymore, but he'd wait by the goalpost, letting out a celebratory woof every time Daniel scored. I looked at the garden we'd planted. The hydrangeas were finally blooming, vibrant blues and purples pushing through the Kentucky soil. It struck me then that I had done exactly what my parents said I couldn't. I had outdone them, not by having more money, but by breaking the cycle. In my house, there are no golden children and no afterthoughts. There is only support, honesty, and a dog who thinks a tennis ball is the greatest treasure on earth. Daniel came running up the porch steps, sweaty and grinning. "Mom, did you see that last goal? It was a literal rocket." I laughed, pulling him into a side hug. "I saw it, kiddo. Top shelf." "Can we have pizza night early?" he asked. "Only if Barnaby gets a crust," I teased. The dog's ears perked at the word crust, his tail thumping a frantic rhythm against the wooden deck. As I stood up, I felt a strange sense of gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the strength it forced me to find. I was 36, a mother, a leader, and a survivor. I had taken the shattered pieces of an 18-year-old's dreams and forged them into a life that was unshakable. I walked into my kitchen, the heart of my home, and closed the door on the past. The shadows of the Louisville house were gone. In their place was the warmth of the life I'd built from scratch, a life where I was finally, truly enough.